Let's pray to start us off here. Father, we are grateful. You are good. And even though sometimes we struggle to believe that, to see it, we know that it's true. We know that you're watching out for us, that you are the only provider of hope. And so we're about to look at your word and some ideas and law and wisdom. We ask that you help us to be wise. Help us to experiment. Help us to think deeply and outside of our box for a little while. And then show us the truth. We actually really do want the truth. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, so that's the little clip that I try to say at the beginning of every few of these, that if you are here and you're looking for a traditional Bible study where I walk through a text and I ask people what it means to them, you are in the wrong place. This is only what Jace believes about everything, and everyone else is just supposed to shut up. That's pretty much what this is all about. Okay, that's not true. You guys can jump in anytime, but the truth is that this is going to be a little bit, a little different than you're used to. So people have tried to explain it in different ways, but this is a safe place for you to play in theology and Bible, and for us just to think through things. Last time we thought through whether the Trinity was a real thing or not, and you guys didn't really participate at all in that, but we at least thought about it a little bit. Maybe you've thought more about it since then, but today we're not going to do that. It's over. You missed your chance to talk about the Trinity. We're going to talk about law. So what we've been talking about is wisdom. So this is the topic: wisdom versus law. Okay. Specifically, when it comes to wisdom, we've been talking about Proverbs. So we looked at chapters 8 and 9 in some detail. I wouldn't say depth, but we actually read through it and we talked about it and saw some cool connections with what?
Wisdom and folly?
With wisdom and folly. Yep, that's what we were talking about. Wisdom versus folly, those two roads. And what were the connections that we found here? They went all the way back to Genesis, right? So we have Adam, or mankind, and he has to go with wisdom or folly. Which direction will he go? That's the stuff we've been talking about. Okay, so traditionally we talk about law very differently than wisdom. Okay, we give certain laws to our children and we try to give them wisdom. Those are two different things, usually. If I give laws to my sons, do not step foot in the road, I expect them to not set foot in the road. I do not give them wise advice about, it might not be a good idea to step into the road. No, when you're 3 years old, you do not go into the road. You do not have the ability to think past that. Just obey what I am saying, right? This is what we think of when we think of law. Rules. Do not go through the red light, period, right? No exceptions. But as you grow up, we recognize maybe there are some exceptions to going through the red light, right? What if the light is broken and it's been sitting there for 8 minutes and you have to get somewhere? What if you have to get to the hospital and it's only been sitting there for 1 minute? You're like, you know what? I don't even care. I'm going to break the law. I'm going to go for it. There are different reasons why you might ignore laws depending on your age. But I expect my 3-year-old to follow my laws completely. And fortunately, I'm still bigger than my 3-year-old, right? So I can enforce these laws. I can no longer enforce the laws with my 16-year-old who lives in another state and honestly might be able to beat me up now. So I don't, yeah, look at, geez. Yeah, don't show that again. That was amazing. Nice job, Davin. Those of you who don't know, that's Davin, the one with the huge biceps on the other side. All right, so now we're going to talk about law. Hopefully you've had a chance to go to the Tuesday School page. You've told everyone that you're coming, which we're very happy that you're here. And you have picked up these great notes that I spend tons of time working on. And if you're not getting, there's nothing I can really do about it except for be frustrated. You want some? Okay. Actually, I made 3 copies. I think there's probably some on my desk.
I appreciate that.
At least I pressed the 3 buttons, so I hope they're there. It says read according to genre, law at the top. But I need these 2, sorry. Okay. So we do have some people in the, okay, just one in here with me. and a dozen there, and a bunch.
Where are the online notes?
5. So it is good to see everyone that I didn't say hello to. My dad's on here. Hi, Dad. And Tara's on here. Nice to see you from Decatur. And I don't know. I think I said everybody else. All right, even though I can't see it.
We don't actually have online notes this time. Sorry.
All right.
My fault.
Oh, Travis did not put the notes on there that I worked so hard on? Wow. Everyone, please send him bad emails.
I thought this was a wisdom, not a law.
We love you anyway, man. So those of you who don't know, Travis is a very good friend of mine. I can tease him whenever I want. I will also take that privilege with Josh and my dad and my son and Karen and Brad and Matt. Okay, pretty much all of you are in trouble. I will insult all of you just because we're good friends at this point. Okay, so 3 different meanings for law. That's how we start off on the notes if you had them. Law is the legal sections of the Old Testament, right? So legal sections. Or it might just be Torah as a whole. Or it might be the 10 Commandments. So whenever you see the word law, you have to determine what we're talking about here. So if Jesus says, you know, we fulfilled the whole law, is he talking about we fulfilled the 10 Commandments? We talk about the Pentateuch, that is the first 5 books of the Bible? Or are we talking about like the legal sections of the Pentateuch, like Exodus chapter 19 through 21, or some passages in Deuteronomy, or a lot of Leviticus, those kinds of things, or Exodus 19:20, those particular passages. What is it that we're talking about when we say the word law? Okay, this is a rhetorical question. You're not supposed to answer it because we don't know. Like, that's what we need to ask before we're doing anything when we talk about law. What are we dealing with? You also need to know that law, this part of law, is set up as a covenant. What's a covenant?
Partnership.
Partnership. It's a good word. Anybody want to? Everyone's just happy with Josh's definition?
A special promise.
A special promise. Ooh, I like that. That makes it sound like one of those after-school specials. A special promise. Okay, so covenant is a relationship. Okay, so partnership I think works perfectly here. Partnership. A relationship that God sets up with us and guarantees by his word. That's me being a good little reformed boy there. That's the catechism question and answer. Right? What is a covenant? A covenant is a relationship that God sets up with us and guarantees by his word. So there is a relationship. God has these different covenants, and the covenants are often written down. Okay? In the ancient Near East, we have these covenants that are written between one king and another king. We've talked about this before, but I'm going to jump back to our Genesis discussion because it's been several months. Remember that there is I need a bigger board is what I really need. Remember that there are 2 groups of people. One is called a suzerain, right? This is a kind of king. This suzerain is the conquering king. He's the one who has defeated the other king in battle. You might remember your history, right? If you've done any kind of world history throughout your life, you're going to talk about a suzerain and a vassal. These aren't biblical terms. These are just historical terms that we all know about. Okay, so a suzerain is a king, and we have a vassal. The vassal owes money to the suzerain king so that the suzerain king will protect him. Okay, it's a nice racket. This king comes in, conquers this other kingdom, and then demands tribute, taxes. Right, so the vassal will then pay those things. Now the vassal is a representative of the suzerain king. And they will have an agreement. They'll write copies of this agreement, and they'll put one of those in the library of the suzerain king. So here's the agreement, and one is going to go into the library of the vassal king. Okay, they should look identical. We do this all the time, right? We make contracts, and it goes into your filing cabinet, also goes into the filing cabinet of whoever you're making the deal with, and you sign it at the bottom or in blood or whatever it is that you do, right? That's all this is. So we have 2 different agreements. And if they do not obey these certain things, right? So we've got stipulations. If they do not obey the stipulations, then they're going to have to put up with the consequences, right? Pretty simple. So in each one of these kinds of things, they have five different sections to this treaty, to this covenant. It's just a treaty. It's an agreement, right? A relationship. Don't kill us. We'll do these things for you. Five different things. One is a preamble. Preamble might say something like, I, King Jace, am awesome. Okay, that might be my preamble. Okay, and then I will have a historical prologue. Okay, now these might be connected. I'm trying to give this for pedagogical reasons. I'm trying to fill out this five different things, but they're going to be connected to some extent, right? So historical prologue is, I, Jace, am awesome. I have come and conquered all the territory from Bakersfield, California, to Warsaw, Indiana, to Poolesville, Maryland, and Decatur, Illinois, you know, wherever you guys are, right? I've done all of these things. And by the way, also, I have redeemed you from the slavery that you had before. I'm a benevolent king. Life is really good. And here are my list of laws for you. Here are my requirements. Here are the stipulations that I have. Okay, so they have to follow these particular stipulations. And if they don't follow the stipulations, there are going to be sanctions. Okay, if you do not abide by my word, if you do not pay me $500 a week for my benevolence, for keeping all other people from destroying you, then I will come in and destroy you. Okay, or I might say, the sun will stop shining and the moon will turn to blood and the parasites and the frogs and the fleas and the crickets, grasshoppers, hail, blood in the water, you know, I'm going to give you all these kinds of things, right? These are going to be the sanctions if you do not obey the stipulations. And then finally, there is going to be what we call a dynastic disposition. That is, there has to be some way to continue this contract after the suzerain king dies or the vassal king dies.
Dynastic what?
Okay, so that is, my son will take over after this. When he is also king, all the rules still apply. He will come and conquer you. Okay? So you now have the idea of suzerain and vassal. You're thinking, okay, what does this have to do with the law? Okay, these right here are the laws. Or if we're talking about the law, all of this is the law. So this is all Torah, or it could be just this section of Torah. All right, or there could just be little tiny sections under each one of these that we'll call law, like rules. Okay, so some people would argue that the preamble looks a lot like Genesis, or Genesis looks a lot like a preamble. Exodus looks a lot like a historical prologue. You can probably figure out where I'm going with this, right? Leviticus gives you all the stipulations. Sanctions are coming in here as well, right? In the book of Numbers, right? This is what happens. They're in the wilderness and miserable because they didn't obey the stipulations. They weren't keeping holiness code that they were supposed to be keeping. And the dynastic disposition is Deuteronomy. If you read Deuteronomy, you're going to find that a lot of the same things from these are being repeated almost verbatim in Deuteronomy, almost like it's a new covenant, but it's the same covenant for a new generation. Does that all make sense? Those of you whose faces I can actually see, this is where you nod or smile or in some way show me that you're listening. All right. Okay. So Deuteronomy is this last dynastic disposition. This is, that's why a lot of people don't call this a Pentateuch. Instead, they might just refer to these four. And then we talk about this one down here as part of the Deuteronomistic history. As you're organizing the Bible, people call this the Deuteronomistic history. So whoever wrote Deuteronomy also wrote Kings and Joshua, Judges, Kings, and Samuel. Okay, this is all part of the here we go, Deuteronomistic history. Yeah. Other people would say, actually, there's 6, and Joshua should be part of the law too. We don't need to get into those discussions right now. That's biblical theology stuff, and you don't care about any of it. All right. So the Pentateuch is set up as a covenant treaty between a suzerain and a vassal. That's the law. It's separated into these 5 different places, and the covenant, we would say, is still continuing in some sense, but not at the same time. Okay, so this is a covenant that is made with a group of people at a particular time in history. Okay, with Israel. When? I guess it depends on when you think this was written, right? So 1450 is the time probably of Moses, somewhere around that time period, if you think it was Moses. If you think it's later, let's go as late as, I don't know, let's just say 500s, right? If you think it's during the exile. Okay, so it could be anywhere in between all this. It could be during the monarchy, so 950, during the time of Solomon, maybe David. We don't know the timing of this. We discussed all that when we dealt with Genesis a long time ago. But this is what you need to know. This is the background information you know as we jump into law. Most of you are thinking when I say law, rules, I assume. How do we keep the rules? And that's the big question. Wisdom versus rules. Do we give our children rules or do we give them wisdom? Same thing for our churches. Do we write more rules or do we try to guide them in wisdom? This is where I'm trying to get to after these last 4 weeks of talks that we've been dealing with. All right. So history is the next section on mine. I'm sorry if this seems pedantic. Hopefully it's somewhat interesting to get to the fun stuff. Actually, I think this is super fun. So just pretend that you think it's super fun too. All right. So history. Israel is a kingdom of priests. You've heard this said before, a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. This is the covenant agreement that they make with God and that they are now asked to obey. They are a holy nation, a kingdom of priests. Remember that Adam equals Israel equals priests. Okay, so they are a kingdom of priests. That's what they're supposed to be holy. That's what Leviticus talks about. It's the whole point of Leviticus, how they're supposed to be holy. They have to do this. Now they're priests, that is, that they are representatives to everyone else, to the rest of the nations. So if we have a suzerain up here and we have a vassal down here, the priest is supposed to mediate between those. I before E, except after C. Okay, priest, right? They're mediating between the vassal and the suzerain. In this case, the suzerain is God, and the vassal is Israel. Adam, you, right? You are the suzerain. You're a king. You're a representative of God in the world. Okay, but you don't have direct access to God, especially back then. So let's take you off of this, because you kind of do right now have direct access to God, right? But they didn't, and so Israel needed some sort of a mediator. And a priest is one of those mediators. That's what Adam's job was, to mediate the rules of the covenant to the rest of creation. So here's our partnership. Here is our agreement that we're making. Here's our relationship. And I want to let everybody else know about this relationship, how awesome it is. You definitely want this suzerain king to be the one who reigns over you because he's a benevolent king. He's good. All of his rules are amazing. They're set up for us to follow because they're beautiful. The law of God is like honey dripping off the beard of Aaron, right? All this stuff. Okay, so let me let somebody in. Since I don't see Travis and Sarah, they might not be letting them in. So, all right. So, okay, so they're a kingdom of priests and a holy nation, and God is now revealing Himself in a new way. So God is holy, and He wants His people to be holy, representatives of Him. And so, what He's going to do in this Leviticus thing is He's going to have all of these consecrations, all of these ways to make things holy, to move from common to holy. Whoops, to holy. That's what we're hoping for, that these things will become that. Now, the problem in all of these rules is that it's really easy for something to move from common to uncommon or cursed, or something's wrong with it, right? You touch a dead body, right? You have your menstrual cycle, it's that right time. There's mold in your house, like it doesn't matter what it is, all these things make you fall, okay? They keep you from holiness, which is what you're trying to do. So Leviticus is set up with a list of rules that allow you to regain your holiness, your purity of some kind, your ritual status. That's what it's all about. That's the main idea here. Okay, now, remember, our big point is, how does this apply to you? That's where we want to get to eventually. But you have to understand what's happening to them first before you can jump to you now. So holiness is God's nature, consecrations, washing clothes, abstaining from sexual relations, don't touch anything dead, no pigs, things like that, right? All these things are important to him. And then the whole point of that is to establish a boundary marker. I don't need to write anything down. To establish a boundary marker between them, those people who are in covenant with God, and those people who are not.
Set apart.
They're set apart. Great word. Okay, that's what holiness means, to be set apart. So these are the ones that have boundary markers now that get them close to God. And everybody else has to stay away. Now, this is super important when you start reading Paul. We're not going to get into this tonight. Maybe not ever, I don't know. But when you start reading Paul and he starts saying things like works don't matter,
Romans, yeah.
right? Romans, Galatians, Corinthians,
Yeah.
it's heavy in Romans where works don't matter. What he means here is boundary markers. Things that keep you set apart differently than all the nations, because Paul's main purpose in writing all of these books, right, or letters to these people, is to make sure that the Gentiles are not second-class citizens. So they don't need any of these boundary markers anymore. It's okay if they aren't circumcised. It's okay if they eat pigs. It's okay if whatever. Okay, he wants Gentiles and Jews to be on the same footing. So anytime you see the word all in Paul's writings, you need to think of it like this: Gentiles too. Okay, you don't need to think all as in all of humanity, although that ends up being true if it's Gentiles and Jews. But his point isn't to argue for the sinfulness of mankind, for instance. It's to argue for the sinfulness of the Jews and the Gentiles, and the fact that the Gentiles get in. Okay, that was a little bit of an aside, but I thought helpful as you're reading through Paul, especially if you read Romans as, this is my way to get into heaven, which is never the point of Romans. Okay, there's no Romans road. Sorry, everyone. Right? There's no like, here's the way you get into heaven if you just follow these 5 simple steps from Romans. That's not what it's designed to do. Okay, but that's not what we're talking about. Back to where we are. All these asides, right?
Murder some people's theology. I love it.
Yes. Sorry if I'm murdering your theology, but it's good for you, I think. Remember, that's the whole point of what we're doing here, is helping us think through some of this stuff. The point is not to murder your theology, it's to help you think and reconstruct your theology according to what the Bible's saying, instead of what you've just always been taught is some system of government. Okay, so we don't want the system unless the system agrees with the actual Bible, how the Bible behaves. We care about how the Bible behaves. So God's presence, remember, so he's giving the law, right? Where does he give the law? It's Zoom, so you can participate, but yeah, it's too hard. What?
Horeb or Sinai?
Yeah, Horeb, Sinai, right? So he climbs up the mountain, right? And there's lightning and thunder and cloud and just scariness. But here's Moses. He's climbing up the mountain. He's going to go up and meet, and he's going to come down with his 2 tablets of the law. I don't know why this always happens, but give me 1 second to...
Mel Brooks, he has 3 and he breaks 1.
Yeah, oops, yeah, Mel Brooks, yeah. All right, so he gives you 2 covenants, right? 2 tablets, okay? And they've got all the commandments on them, probably on the back as well, and then repeated on the other one. Daggone this
What's
stupid
happening?
computer.
You're so good.
Okay, I'm still connected. I just can't see everybody. I'm going to scream. No one else can tell what's happening, right?
Blame it on me.
You guys don't know anything.
We see you.
You can see me, yeah.
We can see you
That-
beautifully.
It keeps coming up.
You're doing great, Jace.
Thank you, whoever said that. Sounded like Josh with his patronizing.
Maybe.
All right, I'm sorry, everyone, that you're just looking at my pin or whatever. Let's see here. Where is Zoom? Okay, hopefully that will work. We will find out. Okay, so 2 tablets, okay, not 1 through 4 and 5 through 10 of your 10 commandments, right? But rather 1 through 10 and 1 through 10. Okay, now the reason this is important is because I'm trying to take you into the ancient Near East. Okay, they're going to have 2 covenants. They're going to be the same covenant. They're going to be repeated one on the other one because one has to go into the suzerain's camp and one has to go into the vassal. Here's all the vassal people down here. Okay, so one's going here, and they're duplicate copies. They're keeping the law. These are the stipulations. You must obey these things. Now, you might remember where the 10 Commandments are actually put. Okay, so they're given down here, and they're put into the Ark of the Covenant, which is very significant because the Ark of the Covenant is the palace of God, right? It's the place where God reigns. That's his footstool. And it's also because there is no palace, because there is no temple when it's first given, it's also the palace of the people. So it is both at the same time. So they're both put into that. And we don't know what happens later on in history, whether they're removed, but we know that the Ark of the Covenant is put into the tabernacle and then into the temple, and then eventually into a top secret warehouse underneath the archives because Indiana Jones found it and all is well. All right, so that's all historical fact, by the way. Okay, so God's presence is felt by everybody as he descends onto the mountain. Everybody's afraid. Moses goes up as the mediator, okay, as that person in between the suzerain and the vassal. That's his job. He's in between the two. He is, in many sense, a priest, a king, and a prophet. He's actually called a prophet, the greatest prophet. He runs a whole nation of people, so he's king, and there's a sense in which he's a priest because sometimes he and Aaron are unidentifiable as separate. They come together in some cases, and you can't tell who's who. Like Moses and Aaron went up, and then only Moses is there, and things like that. There's all this strangeness. Aaron has a rod, Moses had a rod. Both of them do the same thing sometimes. So he is, in some sense, a prophet, priest, and king, which are the 3 mediating positions, right? These are the things that mediate between God as suzerain and us as vassal, that mediator. Of course, Moses isn't a great mediator. Aaron's not a great mediator. Aaron breaks the covenant right away, right, before he's even got it. Moses is a disaster, never makes it into the promised land. So really, we need a better mediator to mediate the law. All right, all of this is history. All this is just stuff we need to know about. So now let's talk about the law itself. Okay, so remember, we've got the 10 Commandments as law. We've got the big picture law as Torah, and law as Torah includes all the narratives. Okay, there's lots of narratives. There's some poems. Like Genesis chapter 1 is kind of a poetic narrative, right? So we've got narratives, we've got poems, and we've got law, like traditional law. Do not do this, do this. So we've got lots of different genres in law. So this is all law. Okay. So now when we get down to the particulars of laws, like these right here, now we have 2 different kinds of laws. One is called apodictic, and one is called casuistic. Now, you'll want to memorize this, especially all of you single people out there, because this great come-on lines, people in bars or wherever you're at, right? So what do you think about apodictic laws? That's a great way to pick up a date, as I understand. That always works for me. All right. Or just at a party and you're just hanging out with people, just say, hey, have you thought about casuistic laws lately? Yeah. So,
Casually.
yeah, casually. Just, yeah, bring it up just you're sitting down. Hey, what's up? You know, it's kind of a Joey. How are you doing? Thought about casuistic laws lately? Yeah. All right. You know,
Laughing.
I know. If I don't have Karen is like my active listener. She's the one who's always smiling, like, yeah, I get what you're saying. Like, you made a good joke. I like that. The rest of you are just boring. I just need to smile more. Smile more. Gracie's smiling. All right, I give it a, okay, good. Matt, okay. So, we got it. Okay.
So,
Apodictic versus casuistic laws. Let's start with apodictic laws. If you had those brilliant notes that I prepared for you, they'd all be right here and they'd be listing this. They would be listing exactly all the things. So an apodictic law is a principle which generalizes a case law or a cultic regulation. Okay, so it's a general statement about a case law. So it's a statutory law. Travis can tell us all about laws, I'm sure, if he wants to, but he's driving and doesn't want to drive off the road. A statutory law, and these two, apodictic and casuistic, they will mutually define one another. Okay, this will make sense in just a second. Just stay with me. They're going to help each other define what the law actually is going to say. So these laws are more foundational, more general, okay, not very specific, big picture kinds of laws. And the advantage of that is it has a very wide application. It applies to a lot of different things. But the disadvantage of it is, of course, that it has no specificity. Like, you've got to do a lot of work to figure out what it's really saying because it's so ambiguous. So some of these laws might say things like, thou shalt not, right? So the 10 Commandments are apodictic laws. Big picture, general laws, relatively ambiguous. And I know all of you think, not all of you, but some of you might think that that's the beauty of these is that they are so specific, and we need to make sure that they're on our courthouse walls and all this stuff because they're the covenant. But remember, they're the covenant for a people thousands of years ago. And remember that these laws are general. They have no specificity to them. They are mutually defined. They get defined through casuistic laws or case laws. Now, it's a good thing to have these kinds of laws, but we still have to work to try to understand them. So we can look at every single one of these if we want to. Thou shalt not, you guys remember your first one?
Have any other gods before me.
Good job. Have any other gods before me? Now, this is pretty simple, right? We know what this means. It means that we should not worship money or sex or fame in front of God. We should go to church instead of play sports on Sunday. Okay? Fair enough. Not a terrible application, but it's an application. Okay? It's not what it means. We have to determine what it means first before we can jump to the applications. So we have no other gods before me. Okay? We know what you shall not have any, but we don't know what it means by gods, and we don't know what it means by before or other. Any other gods? Like, there's a lot of ambiguity here. Do you see it? Does he mean we should not put any idols in front of the Yahweh idol? So if you're in the temple and you have the Ark of the Covenant put in the holy place, that you also shouldn't have one of your household gods set in there? Or maybe no gods like Dagon in the same place as the Ark of the Covenant. You remember what happens when Dagon gets put next to the Ark of the Covenant? He falls face down. His head, like, what, doesn't the fate, like the head break off or something like that? I can't remember. This fish god. Okay, so is that what it means? Does it mean that you should worship, the first God you should worship is Yahweh before you get to your household ancestors' gods? Because all of our great heroes of the faith had ancestral gods, right?
That's, yeah.
We don't like to talk about that, but there's a lot of stuff going on back there, like Rachel's hiding her gods under her saddle, and we won't get into the details of that one, right? But that's what's happened. There's a lot of weird things happening in the Old Testament that we pretend that we don't know anything about, right? There's like a magic stick that Jacob has to give his animals more health. It's like, I mean, this is straight out of Harry Potter kind of stuff. He's like, ta-da, right? And oh, I get all the spotted ones now. Excellent. You're like, what exactly is happening there? Well, God is in charge of this magic stick. Okay, that's fine. We don't like to talk about those kinds of things, so just pretend that we didn't say that, right? So, yes, heresy. All right, so this was a hard one, right? But the second one is, right, thou shalt not have any graven images. So what does this mean? No graven images? Is God not okay with all his ancestral gods? Think about those things. So, and here's a real good question. How does the narrative, right? So we've got, sorry, somebody say something?
I said we get case law right
Yep.
away at number 1 and number 2.
That's right. We need a case law, don't we?
Yeah. The
In
golden
order to
calf.
understand this. Did you have one in mind?
The golden calf comes right after it.
Right, and that's what I was going to say. I was saying apodictic, casuistic, but also don't forget the narrative stories that help us understand what we're supposed to get out of these laws. Okay, so if we have a narrative of the golden calf, does that explain this? What is it that Aaron does? He takes the jewelry, he throws it into a pile, and out comes a cow, right? Made out of gold. That's how he explains it, more or less. Like, but is he making a graven image? Is he making of another god? Is this the first one or the second commandment that he's breaking? There's a debate there. Like, is it another god that he's put in front of God? Or, as he says, this is the God who brought you out of Egypt. So now he's made a graven image of Yahweh in the shape of a cow. Okay, that's not necessarily an insult, by the way. I mean, in their culture, a cow is very powerful. It's a good thing, right? So there's nothing wrong with that, except for this. You're not allowed to do that. And so for centuries, you understand there's this whole battle called iconoclasm, right? The iconoclast controversy as to whether we can have symbols of God anywhere. So the Catholic Church came down on one side, right? We can have symbols of God. We can have pictures of Jesus on a cross. We call it a crucifix. But the Protestants of the time were fighting pretty hard against that. And you'll notice that in Protestant churches, you don't have any crucifixes. You just have crosses. Nobody hanging on them. What do, though? We put in all of our Bibles little pictures of Jesus and, you know, what he looks like. He's got the beard and he's white with blue eyes. You know, that. So is this breaking the second commandment? What's the third commandment? Come on. You shall
Not take Lord of the name. Lord, take the name of the Lord in vain.
Lord's name in vain. Don't do that. Don't take the Lord's name in vain. Okay, and we all know what that means, right? We can't say GD. Like, I can't even say it in a class, right?
Doggone it.
We'll have to say doggone it. Okay, we're allowed to say that. That's legit, but nothing else. Okay, or dang it. That's probably allowed. Darn it. I don't know. Darn it. It's not probably, it's right on the edge of that. Okay, we can't use God's name in negative ways. Okay, or in vain or empty. Okay, but is that really what it means? Like, do you think that God cared whether I said GD in the Old Testament? Like, was that a problem? You know, that the high school kids were hanging out and they said a lot of GD in there, and but this is exactly what we say, right? When they come over in our church building, you know, those high school punks that are always using bad language and taking my Lord's name in vain. Oh, those people, right? That's probably not at all what was going on back then. That wasn't their struggle. What did they think this had to do with?
Not reflecting the image of God properly.
Yes. Say that again, because I was interrupting you.
Oh, not reflecting the image of God properly. Failing
Okay.
at our vocation. Yeah.
Yeah, not reflecting the image of God properly, not following our vocation, our call. I was going to say not representing God well,
Not being set apart.
not being set apart the way that we've been called to be set apart. All right, I knew Josh was going to do that one because he had a great podcast with Carmen Imes, I think, right?
Yeah. Carmen's book is fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, which explains a lot of this stuff and isn't brand new, but is helpful, right? The idea is there. So that's really what it is. It's not that you said GD, it's that you aren't living to represent God well. You're not following your vocation. You're not keeping your call. Okay, that's a lot different. So stop yelling at the kids in your church about that. Start looking at yourself and figure out how are you representing God. Okay, that doesn't give all of you teenagers watching this. Okay, that's one of you, I think. But it's not just teens, by the way, that use bad language. Right? All of us do. But that's a different thing. This is a question of wisdom, not law. Should we use potty language or not? All I'm saying is that's not the point of this. Okay, there may still be a good reason not to use that kind of language, right? Maybe that is representing God poorly when you use his name as a bad word. That is kind of representing him poorly. So it kind of fits under here. I'm just trying to show you that it's a little bit ambiguous. 4. Go ahead, tell me.
Not murder.
I don't
Sabbath.
think it's thou shalt not murder. Oh, that's actually not that one either.
Remember the Sabbath.
Right, good job. Remember the Sabbath. By the way, 10 commands or 10 words, debar, they're called the 10 commands or the 10 words. These 10 are organized differently depending on what tradition of Christianity you're in. So number 1 and 2 are sometimes the same command. And then when you get to the end, there's some other things going on with the covet one. But we don't care about that. There are approximately 10 commands. We're all kind of saying, here's what they basically mean. So do we keep the Sabbath? Right? So by the way, none of you do. Not one of you keeps the Sabbath. Right? You may have done okay with this one, kind of. Probably haven't made any images of God yet, I'm guessing. Right? You definitely failed on the first one because you probably did put other gods before him in some sense, but maybe not literally in front of. But none of you are keeping the Sabbath because first of all, it's on Saturday. And all of you guys are doing all kinds of things, recreation and stuff like that. Those of you who like Westminster a lot, Westminster Confession of Faith, it says you cannot do recreations on Sunday. Very specific. Seventh-day Adventists are keeping it. Well, better at least, in the sense that they're keeping that day. But are they truly resting from all work? Both their man slaves and their female slaves and their animals? No work? And what do we mean by work and rest?
Hey
Do
Siri,
we mean
text Benjamin
any
Brody. You
expulsion
didn't
of
get
energy?
anything else while you were at the statue question mark.
Say that again?
Hey Siri.
Oh, someone's talking to Siri. Sorry.
Kyle's not on mute.
Oh, how can I hear him then?
He's not on
Oh,
mute.
okay, I'm going to keep going. I didn't hear Siri. So, Sabbath and resting. So there we go. Number 5.
Honor your mother.
Honor parents. Now, what does that mean? How do we honor our parents? As Americans, we haven't a clue what the word honor means.
Don't send them to the old folks.
Don't send them to the old folks' home, right? That's honoring. Yeah, that's probably true in our culture. But basically, it means don't shame them. So how do you shame your parents? Or how did they shame their parents? Well, anytime that they didn't represent God well, they'd be shaming them. Anytime they did something that the community rejected as part of the ways that things should be done, right? They would be shaming them. They'd be bringing shame on their parents. But we don't live in honor-shame culture. So it's pretty hard to shame our parents or honor them. But if you don't honor them, according to some casuistic laws, you know what happens to you, right? They throw giant rocks at you until you die. So if you don't do this. So we might be able to figure out how to do that. Number 6, thou shalt not kill or take life. I heard someone say murder, right? Now, why would someone say murder? It just means take life. The reason that we say murder is because we think through casuistic cases here, case laws. Because we all know that you have to take life sometimes, right? I mean, even wasn't there a commercial there about Buddhists not taking any life except for they're spraying Lysol, right? They're killing bacterial life, right? We all do that. Anybody killed mosquitoes with one of their little things, right? We're all killing things. So you've made an assumption, thou shalt not kill means human life. But then you've got even more questions about what is human, right? We're in huge debates about that right now. What does personhood mean? What does it mean for someone to actually be human or a potential human? Is it okay for me to kill a human in the womb or not? Is that one okay? Well, of course not if we're evangelical, because we understand that to be human life, not just potential human life. But you understand the problem, right? That maybe we shouldn't be quite so specific in the way we understand life. Is there a time, as we think about this, is there a time when someone is 112 years old and they are miserable and they're just being kept alive by machines, but they're still alive, and so we refuse, we can't kill them? And they would say, and please kill me, please. No, we believe in life. Is that what the Bible's trying to get across to us? See, again, so law versus wisdom. These are the kinds of debates that are going to need to come up. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not, what's the number 7? 6.
Commit adultery.
7. Adultery. Okay. How do we define adultery? Okay, I'm trying to think if there's any, like a lot of room for ambiguity on that word in the Old Testament, adultery. Sure, there's some ambiguity here, right? We've got polygamy going on. So how do you exactly, when maybe I am going to marry my brother's wife or something like that? That's probably not adultery. I haven't thought about this one before. Anybody help? Is there any ambiguity in adultery?
Yes.
Isn't it covet
Well,
your
can you
neighbor's
commit-
wife?
Covet your neighbor's wife is number 10. Sorry, somebody said something. Can you what?
Can you commit adultery in your mind?
Oh,
Or
there you
Are
go.
we just talking about physical?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Jesus has to deal with that one, doesn't he? Right? It's
Yeah.
not just about that. That's part of his Sermon on the Mount, chapter 5 of Matthew. Might be in chapter 6. No, I think it's still in 5. Right? So yeah, is it intention or not intention?
And where are the lines?
Or
Is
not?
it just if someone is in love with another person, or is it like if you're kissing or if you're having sex? Like, where's the?
Yeah. So it's not just in your mind. It's also like, to what level? What is sex?
Well, can you be in love with 3 people at the same time? What about
Right,
my
polyamory.
My first
Yeah.
high school sweetheart. Like, do I still have feelings of love?
Oh, nice.
Is that adultery? It's ambiguity?
Right. Yeah. Because I'll never stop loving my wife. Am I? Yeah.
Or
I don't know.
Like,
Or yeah, you're divorced. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's 3 love. Yeah.
All right. So, okay, what's this one here? Stealing? Is that right? Stealing number 8?
Yeah.
Okay. Thou shalt not steal. Well, what do we mean by ownership? Right? When is something being stolen and not? What about parents versus children? Like, can I steal my children's money? Is it really their money at all? This is important for me because I'm thinking of robbing my son very soon. He's got a lot of money and I need something to live. So theft, what does it mean to take something, especially in a community that is supposed to be like almost communalism, right? When is stealing? I'm going fast now. 9, stealing, adultery.
Bear false witness.
Oh yeah, lying. I just summarized it as lying, but it actually says bear false witness. Is this lying? Because we have some narratives that tell us that lying is okay. Or it sure seems to, right? Rahab lies to them and she's blessed. The Hebrew midwives lie to the Egyptian overlords and they're blessed. Jacob lies to his dad and succeeds, but I don't know if we call him blessed. I think we still see that as a wrong thing, right?
He still gets blessed though, right?
Yeah, he gets blessed from, yeah.
If he gets the blessing, yeah.
Yeah, he gets the blessing, but I'm not sure that it's seen as a positive thing. He gets the blessing from his dad. But anyway, yes, there are lots of cases, wherever I just wrote that, but lots of narratives that tell us that lying is okay in certain situations. So again, wisdom versus law. I think that there are probably times when I would not tell the truth to my wife. Okay? Is that fair? Would anybody else agree?
Surprise party.
What?
Surprise party.
A surprise party. There you go. That's a great example, right? She says, are you throwing me a surprise party? No, I'm not, honey. Right? Is that bearing false witness? No, I don't think so. Okay. Or she says, do I look fat in this dress? No, honey, you do not. The answer is always you do not. Right? Doesn't matter if she does or not. The answer is always no. Just men out there, learn this from me. Okay? So bearing false witness deals with being in a courtroom. Okay? All right. So that's lying, and then coveting. I don't know where we had that one, number 10 here.
You shall not covet your neighbor's
Shall
house.
covet house, property, wife, whatever. So I don't even know how you don't do that. Donkey, yeah. I've never had a problem with that one. But houses and stuff like, how do you even do that? Like not covet. At what point does it become coveting when I walk in and go, wow, I would love to have a house like this? Where's the line? Because I mean, a lot of you live in houses. I would love to have houses. Well, I'd like to have any house at this point. We're just living in squalor. But right?
Nowhere to live.
Yeah, that's right. Son of Man has nowhere to. How am I getting all these messianic references? Stop with that. All right.
Your question is what level of mens rea does God require? Is that what you're saying?
What level of men? What?
Of mens rea is needed? We're going to have a mens rea discussion here.
What is mens rea?
It's a legal concept for a criminal mind. It's required to prove criminal intent.
Okay, keep going. So I know where you're connecting with me.
Well, so you're saying at what level does coveting actually cross over? So now you're getting into is there an actual criminal intent, a covetous intent?
Premeditated.
Not just the fact. So like, we've got those things in the legal system.
Yeah. So you have tons of these case laws that eventually define things like coveting. When you've passed that line, whatever that line is. Okay, so does this make sense to everybody? I've now beat this horse dead, right? Like that's apodictic laws. How much time do I have? Anybody got a clock?
5:50.
5:54. 5:54. Okay, so we're definitely not going to get to the discussion today. We'll save till next week, but I still want to get to casuistic laws. All right. So now we have casuistic laws or case laws. Okay, and on my brilliant notes that I wrote out here, let's see here. Casuistic laws are specific laws which give definition to the statutory laws. They mutually define these case laws and cultic regulations, just like we've been talking about. They're very precise. They have narrow, immediate applicability. Okay, very, very narrow. They only apply to one little tiny thing. They're so specific. And they have, yeah, okay, so that's it. So some examples of this, all right? If you have a Bible, you can look this up. If not, you can just listen to me. Deuteronomy chapter 23, I think. Actually, it might be chapter 22 now that I see this. There you go. If a man, okay, so I'm gonna read you the Hebrew here. I'm going to read it in kind of a Hebrew setting here. If a man takes a woman, another man's wife, and sleeps with her, that he and the woman must die. You must purge the evil from among you. Okay? Must purge the evil from Israel. The next verse says, if a man, wait, let's just stop right there for a second. Okay, if a man takes a woman who is married to somebody else and has sex with her, he is to die and she is to die. Did I read that right? Yep. And the woman must die. Now, I hope that all of you would say, that's a horrible law, right? I mean, maybe the man should die, or if you don't think he should die, he should at least be imprisoned. There should be justice done. Let's just leave it at that. Whatever justice looks like in your view, it should be done. But this poor woman, that doesn't seem very fair. Oh no.
What happened?
All this time, everybody got cut off from Facebook Live. I don't know why it turned off. Oh, well, their loss. Okay, so, all right, the second verse says, if a man happens to meet in a town a virgin pledged to be married, and he sleeps with her, you shall take both of them to the gate of the town and stone them to death.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay, so that's the follow-up to that. So if he happens to meet her in a town and he sleeps with her, you take both of them to the gate of the town and stone them, both of them. And I hope all of you would just scream, no, no, no. This is why we don't read this ridiculous ancient book. Okay, it's why it should have no application to us anymore because of things like this. The next verse says, if out in the country a man happens to meet a girl pledged to be married and rapes her, only the man, by the way, same wording, right? And sleeps with her, only the man who has done this shall die. Do nothing to the girl. She's committed no sin deserving of death. So the difference is where the man meets the woman. If he meets her in town or he meets her in the country. Now, if you're reading the NIV, they've gone ahead and changed the words to help you know what's happening here. Okay, they've changed one word in the country to rape, and town they just say sleeps with. Okay, they're not different words as I recall. Both of them have to do with taking a woman, right? It's just take. It's the same, I think it's the same, I'm not positive about this, but I think it's the same Hebrew as in Genesis when he sees that thing is good for the eyes, right? Good, sees and takes and eats. Right? That's what's happening constantly in the sexual realm of the Old Testament. Takes, sees, eats. That's David with Bathsheba, right? He sees her, he takes her, he eats, right? He takes completely. So the reason that this is, I mean, we still wouldn't say country is okay, or country means the woman gets off and town she does not. The reason is that's why you need case laws. You need all of these different case laws. Because if somebody came in, if a woman came in and she was put before the judge and they said, okay, this woman was in town and somebody took her and had sex with her, what do we do? The judge is not going to say, kill her. Although that's what the text says. He's going to go into the details of this particular thing, right? And I skipped some verses in here, right? You shall take both of them to the gate of that town and stone them to death. The girl, because she was in a town and did not scream for help. And the man, because he violated another man's wife. What if she was in town and she was screaming, but she was gagged? What if the first thing the man did to take her was beat her over the head, and then he took her into the back room, gagged her completely, and then had his way with her? Would the judge say, I'm really sorry, it was in town, you're both going to die? Right? That's the specificity of a case law. Obviously, the judge would say, all right, in this case, you're fine. What he's trying to find out is whether this was consensual or not. That's the idea. If it's consensual, then they both are killed. If it's not, if it's just rape, then only one is killed. Okay, so the law makes some sense if you read it in its specificity. Okay, and there's a ton of other rules in here. So the book of the covenant is Exodus chapter 21 and following. So the question of like divine presence issues and how Israel is to encounter This is what we call the law. So law in this case equals book of the covenant. And that is chapters 21 through 23 of Exodus. Okay, that's what it's called, the book of the covenant. So you'll see personal injury laws starting in verse 23. Let's just read a little bit of this so you get a handle on it. Because this is when you get to Exodus chapter, once you get past 20 in the 10 Commandments, nobody cares anymore, right? Like we've already finished the cool part of them going through the Red Sea, the Sea of Reeds. And after that, chapter 16, not worth it anymore until you get to chapter 20. Then you get the 10 Commandments, rock on. And then from there on, 21 through 23, Book of the Covenant, chapter 24 through 40 is all about the tabernacle and how you need to make the colors fit a certain way, and gold needs to be put on it a certain way, and who carries what. And you're just like, who cares? By the way, that's all part of the law. And part of the law, I assume you have to keep if you want to say you have to keep the law. So all of these things that we're about to look at in the Book of the Covenant are part of the law. If a man is fighting, hits a pregnant woman, and she gives birth prematurely, I'm in verse 22 of 21, and she gives birth prematurely, but there is no serious injury, the offender must be fined whatever the woman's husband demands and the court allows. But if there is serious injury, either take life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. Right? So this is the law of talion, lex talionis, tooth for tooth, eye for eye. You've all heard of that one before. Are we happy with eye for eye, tooth for tooth? It doesn't seem to be what Jesus is telling us. But that's our discussion. That's what we want to get to the Sermon on the Mount. But we're just playing with this. Like, is this what we should be doing? If a man hits a maidservant or manservant in the eye and destroys it, he has to let the servant go free to compensate for the eye. If he knocks out the tooth, he has to let the servant go free to compensate for the tooth. If the boar gores a man or a woman, the bull must be stoned to death, and its meat not eaten. But the owner of the bull is not going to be held responsible unless the bull has a habit of goring, in which case he's going to be responsible too, and he's going to be killed. If a man uncovers a pit or digs one and fails to cover it up, I'm in verse 33, and an ox or a donkey falls into it, the owner of the pit must pay for the loss. If a man's bull injures the bull of another and it dies, they're sell the live ones. Okay, you get the idea. Okay, so this is the first section. Okay, up through verse, really it's 23 through 26, just at the beginning of that. And what I've done is I've already entered into the second part, which is just various laws about social life. You'll see, let's see here. I'm trying to remember what the good verses are. A man borrows an animal from his neighbor and it injures or dies while the owner is not present, he has to make restitution. But if the owner is with the animal, the borrower doesn't have to pay. If the animal is hired, the money paid for the hire covers the loss.
Are you going to bring that up?
All these different things about where restitution is required and where it's not. Okay, I want you to think about each one of these things when it comes to wisdom versus law. Is this the law that we're being required to keep? Okay, so these social laws. Moral laws, starting in chapter 22, verse 21. Do not mistreat an alien or oppress him, for you were aliens in Egypt. Okay, so any fifth encounters, whatever, encounters of a strange kind or whatever, right? You're not supposed to mistreat them. Okay, don't take advantage of a widow or an orphan, because his anger is going to be aroused. Don't lend money to one of my people among you who is needy, or if you do, charge him no interest. Don't blaspheme God or curse the rulers of the people. Don't hold back offerings from your granaries. And this goes all the way up through verse 9, which also ends with don't oppress an alien, because you know how it feels to do that. And in between there, let's see if there's any other brilliant ones. No, we get the ideas there. All right. And then observance of the Sabbath and rituals, verse 10 of 23. 6 years you're to sow fields and harvest the crops. 7th year, let the land lie unplowed and unused. The poor can get food from it. Wild animals can eat. Do the same with your vineyard. 6 days do work, but make sure on the 7th day everybody rests, even the animals. Be careful to do everything I've said. Don't invoke the names of other gods. Don't let them be heard on your lips. So casuistic, right? The case laws are helping to explain the big picture laws. So we have gods, we have the Sabbath rules, all of those different things. And that goes all the way through verse 19 in the feasts that you have to do. And it ends with Travis's favorite, do not cook a young goat in its mother's milk. Okay, so no cheeseburgers, Josh says, yes. Okay, and that's what Travis was talking about earlier today. And apparently there's some cool thing. Do you want to tell everybody, Travis?
I was just listening to a podcast the other day, and they were talking about how in a recent archaeological dig, they actually found an ancient Canaanite religion that actually boiled a kid in its mother's milk. And so now there's a debate about, it has nothing to do with cheeseburgers. It was just a ceremonial distinction to separate the Israelites from this other Canaanite group, and has nothing to do with meat and cheese.
Oh yeah, that was a joke. Yeah.
What?
The cheeseburger thing is a joke.
Right, but no, it is kosher laws. Like people have gotten from this kosher laws,
Right.
and what Travis is saying is
It's
actually it might be just that they were trying to be separate from the Canaanites who did this practice, which is pretty cool. And the end of chapter 23 is how God would act on their behalf of the Israelites, enabling them to take Canaan. And you see God's angel comes in, prepares a way for them. Make sure you worship him. I'm going to establish your borders from here to here. This is all parts of the covenant. And then in chapter 24, it's confirmed, like they do the blood sprinkling and all that stuff. And then all the way on from there on, 25 through 40 is all about the tabernacle, the Ark of the Covenant. This is where, if you've got a study Bible, all your pictures will start showing up of what the tabernacle looks like, what the curtains look like, what the Ark of the Covenant looks like. I mean, you know, because you saw it in Indiana Jones, but it's more or less like that. The lampstand, what it looks like, what the altar, the sea, the laver. And you remember all of that stuff. I don't need to do it. We did all that. In Genesis, remember when we talked about that, and Exodus, when we talked about how the tabernacles looks like the ark, the boat, perhaps, 3 levels, and how it's designed to go up into heaven. You guys remember that? Okay, 5 seconds on that, right? So you've got the big, right, here, and then here, and here. You can't see any of that. Marker. Right, and so as you enter in, right, you are going into where the sea is, which is what we call the laver. They call it the sea, or the basin, where all the water is. And then you have the altar, or what's called the bosom of the earth. So we've got earth and sea right here. So this is earth area. And we enter into here, we go into heaven, as in the place where you can see the clouds and all that other stuff. In fact, going in here, we have clouds, we have incense, the incense offered here. We've got the tree of life, or the lampstand. So we're moving closer and closer. And here we have angels are sewn onto the curtains here. And there are stars here and moon, different things sewn onto the curtains or put on the actual walls of the temple. In the temple, it's gold. So it reflects off, you got these, the fire here is reflecting. So it looks like stars everywhere. And the incense is here. So you go through the clouds and you come into the Holy of Holies, right? The Ark of the Covenant, which is where God dwells. So it's just this movement up from common to slightly holier to getting more and more holy, right? Into the tabernacle. That was an aside, free. You don't have to pay for that particular part. Everything else costs. Okay, so now we are done with the law. The question now is, how do we keep these laws? Okay. All right, so I've written 4 things down here that I'm going to repeat to you that are mildly helpful, but are not going to answer the questions for us. So first, we need to observe the facts, the moral situation, and the emotional situation. Okay, what are the facts of the law? What is it they're saying? What is its context? What's the emotional situation? What's the moral situation? How are people feeling about these things? That's important to understanding the law. Okay, the law does come across, I mean, even though it looks like it's like, this is the way it is, The law is designed to take into consideration feelings and other things like this, because it's through these feelings, like I feel cheated. Well, therefore we need to bring justice. Okay, because we don't always know what it means to be cheated until we feel being cheated, right? And we need to determine whether this is right or not. Or I lost my tooth because somebody went, I'm telling a story and they just went, I can't believe it. And they smacked me and they lost my tooth. Now I feel like I've been harmed here. I can't afford another tooth. So who has to pay for this? Well, it was an accident. Okay, we need a casuistic law. We need some sort of a law in here. So we got to figure out what's the emotional, what's the moral, what's the setting of the facts. We need to figure out what the directive is that's given very specifically. Okay, like we've just done with our apodictic and casuistic laws. Okay, let's not murder the woman if she was raped. Okay, that's just ridiculous. Okay, so what is the actual directive given? We also have to think through questions like, are they really supposed to stone them? Or is this hyperbole? Those are important questions too, but we're not going to deal with that particular question. Keep in mind liberty of conscience. Okay, especially when we're starting to look at this wisdom versus law for us, right? Is there liberty? Can I have a cheeseburger or not? Even though we just read about these kosher laws, is there some kind of freedom for us in this? And then let's not forget the epical, cultural, and personal adjustments. So remember, it took place a long time ago in a completely different culture, and we have this whole other setting of life. Okay, so this is going to ask questions that we're going to do next week, but it's going to ask questions like, what about slavery? Okay, if we take into consideration epical and cultural and personal adjustments, we're going to have to adjust what people in the Bible think about slavery. Because God specifically tells his people to go and make slaves. Okay? And it gets much more brutal than that. Like there are specific ways that they're told to go and take female slaves and how they can enjoy them. And yes, it is a step down from what's happening in their culture already, but it's still not pretty. Almost no matter how you look at it, it's not pretty. So what we want to talk about is some sort of a movement or a trajectory hermeneutic. Trajectory hermeneutics. We want to talk about how there is what Bill Webb calls redemptive movement. That's what we're going to talk a lot about next week. Okay, how to understand this redemptive movement. And here are the questions. What kind of time do I have?
15.
It's 15 after right now?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm done. So here are the questions that I want to talk about next week, and hopefully we'll get these application questions up on the page very soon. The question is, are these laws for today? Are we supposed to keep thou shalt not kill? And if you say yes, we're supposed to keep thou shalt not kill, you need to ask your question, are we supposed to keep thou shalt keep the Sabbath holy? Because most of you have done pretty good in keeping thou shalt not kill, but not keeping the Sabbath holy. Why? Why do you get to choose one and not the other? Okay, or the mold laws or any of the other casuistic laws. How do we know which laws we should continue to follow? Right? Do we bring them into the New Testament? How do we do that? Are laws merely illustrations of wisdom? Okay, we'll talk about that in great detail next week. What do you think about rules only make sense in the service of love? Okay, I've never given rules to anybody that I didn't love. So it's pretty kind of cool, I think. What do you think about laws are meant to limit the damage that we do to one another? Just giving you some quotes from different books. Laws are meant to limit the damage that we do to one another. How about this? The limits on sin have been transferred to the ideal, and so the stories have been sapped of their strength. The limits on sin have been transferred to the ideal. We'll talk about that. That might not follow in your head right now, but we'll talk about it next week. And this, does the Bible give us an ultimate ethic? Are we called to obey the Bible's moral rules? That's what I want to talk about. And if so, how do you determine which ones we're supposed to do? When Ezekiel says things like, some of those laws were bad. Okay? At least some people interpret it as saying that. There are other ways of understanding that, and as Ezekiel 25, I think. Right? And Jesus, for instance, says, you've heard it said, but I say unto you. And I'm not sure that he's deepening it so much. Some people would say he's making it even more strict. I don't think so. I think we're missing what Jesus is doing in the Sermon on the Mount. So I want to talk about that too. All right. So all the boring stuff that I just did is to get us ready for what's next. So the people who missed this are not going to understand what we're doing when we have this discussion. So next week, you want to come in and ask these questions with me. So I'm going to try and get, in fact, Travis, if you can put that on there like today or tomorrow, because you already have it, at least those questions, so that people can get them and start thinking about them. Start talking about them at your kitchen table. Those of you who have people in the house with you and can feel like you can talk about these things. Because I think this is really important. I think the Bible is all about wisdom and not about law. But does that free me to do whatever I want, whenever I want? That's where I start to struggle. Like, what are the limits then? Are the limits just love? Because if it's just love, then we've got a lot more freedom than we thought. Like, as long as I love somebody, it's okay. Right? If I love my son and someone's trying to kill him and I kill them instead, then it's okay. Or if I have a loving relationship, a homosexual loving relationship, as long as I love them, it's okay. It might be that both of those things are okay. That's what I want to talk about, right? Is homosexuality okay? Is it okay for me to kill if I'm protecting? Is it, right? As long as, if love is the only thing, we got a lot more work to do. I hope you see the struggle that the Bible presents to us. And even that ultimate ethic idea. What is the ultimate ethic? Do we stop with the New Testament, or does it continue forward? Can we make new rules today?
Love puts ramifications on it, because if I love someone, I'm not going to do certain things too.
That's right.
So it makes it beautiful.
Yeah. All right, that's it. Thanks for coming. You guys are awesome. I'll say a prayer to let you guys go, and you can stick around, of course. You know I'm going to stick around for a few minutes, but I'm guessing most of you won't. Thank you, Father, for those who came, and let those people on Facebook Live know that I didn't mean to turn them off halfway through. And help us to think through these things, because I think those people who are on here, I think we really want to follow you. And we don't always know what that means. So help us to take your words seriously, not to just experiment for the sake of experimentation, but that we understand you and how we can follow and represent you well in the world. We really want to do that well. So give us that grace, please. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
You know, all you people with just your words on there instead of your faces, I like seeing your faces.